The Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to let it enforce an anti-transgender measure that says the sex on someone's passport must match an original birth certificate. In January 2025, President Trump signed an executive order defining sex strictly as an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female, based on the sex assigned at birth. The order directed the State Department to require that passports reflect a person's biological birth sex, removing or halting the option for a person to choose a gender identity marker, including X for non-binary. Under the Biden administration, passport applicants could self-select M, F, or X for non-binary gender markers. Under the new policy, only M or F would be allowed, and those must match the sex on the birth certificate. In April and again in June 2025, a U.S. district judge in Massachusetts issued a preliminary injunction blocking the enforcement of the Trump-era policy for certain transgender and non-binary plaintiffs. That order was later expanded to cover a broader class of people who are applying for new passports, renewing soon-to-expire ones, or needing changes. The First Circuit Court of Appeals declined to put on hold that district court injunction, meaning the lower court's blocking of the policy remains in effect for now. The Trump administration asked the Supreme Court for an emergency order to lift or suspend the injunction so that the State Department could enforce the birth certificate-based sex requirement while the litigation proceeds. The government argues that passports are international documents, part of the U.S. government's communication with foreign governments, and that it must use what it considers accurate sex designations. It also claims the policy is lawful, does not violate constitutionally protected rights, and applies equally to all people in their view, in that the rule is based on the birth sex rather than identity. Plaintiffs represented by groups like the ACLU argue that the policy is discriminatory and violates constitutional principles such as equal protection under the law. They say it harms transgender, non-binary, and intersex people, including risk of misgendering, emotional distress, and practical difficulties, especially traveling. They point to prior policies and custom where gender identity or an X marker was allowed, and to legal precedents that protect the rights of transgender persons in similar contexts. Passports already issued with an X or a gender marker inconsistent with the birth sex or matching gender identity remain valid until they expire or are renewed under the new policy. The policy change affects new applications, renewals, or changes in the gender marker. If the Supreme Court sides with the administration, it could reverse the lower court's injunction and force transgender and non-binary people to use passports that reflect biological birth sex, which critics argue could create problems in travel, safety, identity verification, and constitutional rights. There is legal risk and uncertainty because the policy's constitutionality is being challenged, especially under equal protection and possibly due process clauses. Let me know your thoughts.